This one's a little less scripted, I think, than most of these. So we didn't actually go and plan this one. So we figured we'd talk about engineering excellence in a way that we actually look at this today. We've got 3 individuals here, phenomenal customers, all different journeys, different areas of their actual engineering excellence journey. And I think there's a lot of different topics that we want to cover. One of them, I think, is really around metrics. And it's the first thing that comes up is how do we start measuring things and how important is measurement? And so, the first thing that always comes up with engineering excellence is measurement. And so when we want to talk about that, I think, Martin, what's your opinion on how do we measure engineering excellence today?
Well, there's two kind of, no, I guess there's 2 sides of it for me. There's the kind of the side of it that helps the engineers, the teams themselves, that's very driven by, how often you're deploying, what are the things that are successful, whether you're having errors or not, but also there is a kind of a thing about, if you're looking at driving excellence, you also need the human soft side of that. You need to be able to query that also, but that's kind of quite different from what, the senior leadership wants to see when they're talking about engineering excellence. There's a relatable between the 2, but they're not really the same thing. The one is derived from the other, but I think really we want to be seeing, things that are actually actionable, which is kind of what you were talking about before, but really go forwards.
Yeah, that's good. I think, and we're early on in the journey of measuring, like knowing how to measure. Most of ours is very anecdotal, right? It's a lot of the soft, like we have these great engineers, right? Like they're making really great things, but we don't know how to show that, right? To your point about the executives and showing them like, all right, here's how efficient we are, or here's how, how many failures we're having, or how many times we're going over our error budgets. Like for us, we have no way of showing like how great we actually are because we are still in that early stage of figuring out like what to measure against and what things to actually use to measure those pieces as well.
For us, it's really operational metrics versus qualitative metrics. Operational in terms of how's our production environment, how's the performance of the APIs, and we gauge that with how well quality is built as well. And from a qualitative perspective, we're looking at our deployments at that point. How many times are teams deploying? How many times are they rolling back? Usually we can also use that to gauge how well the development teams are actually coding from a qualitative perspective. Because if they're deploying often and consistently, then there are some issues and concerns there. So, and then we will gauge that against previous sprints and so forth as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's interesting because you reminded me that like one of my sort of favorite metrics that drives excellence. So we track, it's because you're talking about the quality of deployments, but one of the things that we track is we will track how many bugs we find before we release the software and how many the customer finds, right? And what we want is that to be a really low percentage, right? We're happy to find, if we find 50 bugs before we release it, that's great. If the customer finds 2, then that ratio is fantastic. What we don't want is the other way.
Right, yeah.
But ultimately, it's to drive it so that our customers have a good experience. They have a good experience if we have better engineering, and we have better engineering by catching those things early so that the customer can really enjoy the product.
What you just stated is kind of what I picture in my mind right now is that picture of the alcohol guy with the goatee, and he's like, when we test in prod. Yeah, no.
Let's not do that.
Yeah. I actually did a disservice. So I introduced you by name, but I didn't actually introduce you by your company and your role. And honestly, I'll step back and I'll have that do it because we've got some phenomenal people up here. Would you guys mind giving two minutes on your individual company and your role there at it? I guess we'll start with you, Bob.
Yeah, sure. I'm Bob Chen. I'm the Senior Director of Infrastructure Engineering at iHerb. iHerb is a global e-commerce company. We sell vitamins and supplements, not the happy herb. It would be great, actually, but it is California.
It is California.
And I oversee all of our on-prem and cloud infrastructure, along with the DevOps, SRE, ProdOps, network, database, and I think that's it.
Not much at
Just
all.
a little, yeah.
A fun one for you guys to know about Bob. Bob's actually been a customer of ours 3 times.
Yeah.
So Bob was one of our first customers with Beachbody. He was a customer with ADP, and now he's helping build this engineering excellence at iHerb. Ryan, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Good. I am a senior manager of SRE, platform engineering. Again, those wide range of actual hats that I wear day to day at Yum Brands. So most of you know our brands: Taco Bell, KFC, Pizza Hut, Habit Burger. So we like to say that we're the largest restaurant company in the world. We have over 50,000 restaurants across the globe. And my team really helps a lot of the back end, but also supporting developers with our e-commerce and point of sale systems. So if you're in one of our restaurants ordering stuff from a kiosk, or you're ordering from your web app, online, all of that's coming through all of the systems that we've developed and designed and support. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I was just in Australia, Singapore, Japan, and literally I couldn't see, there were more KFCs than I think I could ever imagine.
Yes, very, very huge over there.
Martin.
So Martin Reynolds, and I am the Director for DevOps and IaaS at Advanced, and that basically means that we look after essentially all of the CI/CD processing, the infrastructure that supports that, the live operations for that, and we do that across the 140 products that Advanced sells, and those products are in everything from healthcare to law firms to schools and colleges. In fact, probably pick an industry. But one of the fun facts about that is that it also means we probably have every technology stack you can think of, from COBOL to Java to C++ to C# to, there's probably Go in there somewhere. There's definitely Node.js. So, we do cover quite a broad stack of technologies too, which makes it fun.
Yeah, fun.
Well, I'll get back to the topic we were on, which was measurements, and I think a lot of it we talked about was quantitative. But I think there's some of the things that are qualitative too, and I think that's an interesting aspect, is we have to look at engineering excellence at both quantitative and qualitative. What are your views? I know, Martin, you I think have specific views on this, but I'll leave it up to anyone.
Yeah. Which one I value most?
Yeah.
Fun.
I mean, in the current scheme of things, my environment, qualitative. It's, I'm going through, I support probably about 30 different engineering teams spread across globally. And obviously every team is a different maturity level, right? It's trying to ensure that every team operates at the same level as best as possible, because we're trying to standardize everything into a single methodology and structure. But with different maturity levels, that brings a little bit of a problem, because certain teams are much more mature, their quality is also much higher, and we're trying to help out the teams that need a little bit more maturity, need to improve quality, and that's a struggle because some teams do really need a lot of help, right? And I think it's also because of how they were operating previously. Definitely were given a lot of, I guess, freedom in terms of how they operate, and I'm trying to rein in on that freedom and improve quality wherever I can, and it's still a journey. I'm still going through it. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way for sure. Being in the reliability side of things, right? Like, I need consistency to make sure that we're hitting those numbers that we need to hit for our customers, and making sure that error budgets are staying where they're supposed to be. And so for me, it is finding out, okay, we have these teams that anecdotally are amazing and we don't have as many problems with them. It's like, so why are they that way, right? What are the things that they're doing that are different from maybe some of the other teams that have, more hiccups, if you will, with some of their quality, with some of their, failed builds, that kind of stuff. Like, what sets them apart, and what makes them truly, the excellent version that we're looking at and what we're looking for. And so that we can take those learnings and say, okay, now let's create some standards around those things and start to apply those with some of the tooling that we have.
Okay. Well, given that this morning, first thing, there's been quite a big focus around that developer experience. And I think that kind of relates into the, if you like, the soft side of it, because actually I would equate developer experience to developer happiness. So when we're talking about, how we do that and how we measure that, it's most of our developers like to write code. They want to solve the hard problems, and what we generally are trying to do is help them do that by taking away all the things that we're talking about up here. But you do also need to be able to measure that. You have to talk to your dev teams, and happy dev teams tend to be more productive, right? If they, having a good culture and a good environment genuinely helps that. Having a clear shared vision for those teams, and that's aligned with the product team that they're working with and the markets that they're going to, because actually that's how you get, happy customers, right? Because you've got happy development teams who are building the things that they're passionate about, that they know they own, and then that drives out, and then you start seeing things like the NPS scores from the customers that go up, and actually getting those two things together, right? We would have, and again, it's qualitative, I guess, but I know it makes the developers nervous, the product team happy, and the customers ecstatic, is actually getting the customers in when you're doing that requirement stuff, actually being the customer, so getting your hands on the, I can't remember who gave an example on that earlier, but I'm a big fan of that.
So I have a fun one, I think. Might be a little controversial, so we'll try to stick this in there.
Okay.
A few guys talked about guardrails. We talked about somewhat codification of best practices, and I think this one can set people off differently, because it can go one way or the other as how strict we get with this. I know we have some strong opinions around the codification of best practices. So.
No trust.
No trust.
Zero trust.
Zero trust.
Talk about zero trust authentication. Zero trust in the actual infrastructure environment.
Zero trust in the infrastructure environment.
I trust but verify. Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Golden pathways.
Yep.
But you definitely need the guardrails. You absolutely need the guardrails. Although I did like your story that you relayed before about the guardrails and deploying to production. I'm pretty sure that was your story.
Yeah, I have multiple stories on guardrails and deployments. But what we're doing now with how we're doing our pipelines is we're going with a paved road model, where essentially have a very strict guardrail. We wanted to, so I originally started out wanting something strict, and my SRE team decided how strict we wanted to be, because based off what they see and what they're trying to work with the development teams on. So I did support the decision to go with a really strict model, because we wanted to set a specific mindset of how we should operate at a high performing level for all the engineering teams across the board. And then once they are at that level or getting towards it, we will slowly consider removing the guardrails, right? So at this moment, they have zero edit or console access in Harness. All they can do is view, look at the debug logs, and then approve. Everything else is all done via Terraform code that they can submit a PR, and then the SRE team reviews and then approves it, and then it gets pushed out.
We take a very similar approach. Yes, I say trust but verify, but the reality is not everything is to that level just yet, right? We take time to build in those guardrails and make sure that they're just flexible enough for where that team is at, or where the team as a whole is at. We're not just going to say, all right, we're going to implement this tool and here you go, have fun, right? We're going to take people along in that journey to make sure that they're ready for us to release, even more of that control. While I say we definitely trust and verify, but it's not a wide open do whatever you want, right? There's still, those guardrails are there, and they move, they flex in and out, right? Depending on what's going on, the seasonality of some of our business goals and objectives, that can change some of that stuff too. I think even remaining flexible in that trust is always good.
Yeah. I mean, we are also trust but verify. A lot of our guardrails are actually driven around by I know we've just been talking about maturity model, but a lot of our guardrails are driven by the maturity model. And as we've matured as an organization, we have kind of gone through this process of saying, okay, we're bringing in these new restrictions. You must have your security testing done. You must have this done. And you know what? After, in 3, 2, 1 weeks, now it's blocking. Right? That is the approach that we take, and it's, it is very much we want to take the developers and the engineering teams along the journey with us, because we find if we leave them behind, then they fight against it, and they will try and find ways around it.
My fight from day one.
But we really want them to be engaged with it with us. It's, we want them to go on the journey with us. We want them to understand that actually what we're doing is driving excellence. And it all goes back to that same thing. We want the developers to be happy. We also want quality, and then we make our customers happy. That's the goal.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and on today's topics of developer experience, we definitely do worry about and care about developer experience, right? So we have a good feedback loop with our engineering teams to provide us feedback. Is yes, we understand we started really, really strict, but then we didn't start taking feedback loops and restructure the guardrails just so look, you guys now understand what we're trying to do. I'm willing to remove this guardrail and then give you that specific option and feature and so forth. So we are worried about that, and we are, because originally definitely everybody was complaining about what we're trying to achieve. But once we did a roadshow of getting them to understand what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve, they do understand, and then it becomes a partnership at that point.
Yeah.
That's key, I think, and that's why I say take a long journey as well. I love that metaphor, because it is a partnership between what you would consider maybe traditional ops teams and the developers. Like if we have a true DevOps culture, right? Like it's not we're going to hit you over the head with a hammer. It's hey, what should this look like so that we can all mutually benefit from this, right? So that we're not hindering your experience when you're needing to deploy code, so you can get it fast, right? And deliver quickly on your objectives and stuff.
So I think this is interesting, because guardrails, a lot of times, people think about slowing down the process. We're adding all these extra pieces to it. We're making it more complex. I kind of have a different view. I think one of the things that we've done a disservice to is that, we haven't been all playing by the same rules. All right? It's like we went to our engineering teams and said, let's play football. And the interesting thing about that is, we've got some people playing football that the world plays. We've got others playing Australian rules football. And then there are a few of us that are playing American football, which I'm not sure if it's actually football, but maybe that's controversial in itself. But the reality is, if we're playing different rules, or we're playing different games, it makes it very hard to actually go fast, right? Yeah. Once we put guardrails in place, once we put rules around it, once we're playing by the same rules, I want to know what your guys' opinion is. Does this speed up? Does this increase velocity? Does it slow it down?
I would say it's going slow to go fast. So, you put those new guardrails in, and, you start playing by the same rules as you describe it. It will slow you down for a little while, but ultimately what you get, once you get past like the hump, if that makes sense, you get past that hump, and it makes you go faster, and you're delivering better.
Absolutely.
So you put those rules in, and there is always like how do I fit in that little rule set to go forwards. But I think once you're kind of aligned with it and you understand it, you definitely get faster, and you also get consistency in the ways people are working, and that actually generates more good practice, right? So yes, there is a slowdown, but then you start getting, well, okay, now you've done that one, actually, have you thought about doing this? Because we can go faster in our team within this, doing this, so maybe we can make that happen everywhere else. So it's a constant improvement thing. But yeah, it is, a little bit slow to go fast,
Yeah, I think, definitely anytime you have change, there's going to be that like either resistance to it or complete pushback, right? But there's always that okay, if you can get them to understand the why we're doing it, and if you have that trust that you've built with those teams, the more apt to say, okay, I trust you, let's see how we can do this together, right? And I think that makes that hump a little bit more bearable, especially because everyone is dealing with it. It's not just like, here, go have fun, and that's going to hurt your team, haha, right? But I get what I want. It's more of a no, we're going to go through this pain together, so that on the other side of it, we're a better organization for it.
On my end, the velocity varies by team. There are definitely teams that that are crawling before they can even stand up and walk, and then some teams are just walking and go right into running. But what we did was we actually also built a community space for all of those engineering teams to actually talk together, along with folks on the infrastructure side, where we're helping them, debug issues or kind of train them on what to do and how to do it. But what's impressive to see was in that space, the other engineering team leads are actually helping each other out. So the teams that are crawling, they actually end up walking and running a lot faster with that community support within our own engineering organization.
I quite like that, having that engineering space for collaboration.
Originally, it was kind of a chew-out session and like a kumbaya session for them, but we finally got them to get along and give the program and help each other out.
I think it's actually good for organizations to kind of recognize that and recognize that it needs a champion and someone to drive it. In our own, my own company, it's been quite exciting recently. They've actually, employed somebody now whose job it is to kind of look at those patterns and practices and what those guardrails are, so that we can actually, be consistent and talk about it in a bit, and actually have it driven rather than just an evolution from a small team, be a proactive event, not a reactive or an enforced event.
Yeah. By design, not by default, right?
Exactly. By design and not by default.
By design and not by default. I like that. I think we've talked about this kind of paved road. We've talked about the guardrails. A lot of you have actually implemented templates and different things and kind of even progressed to that point. You got that crawl, the walk, the run, and you've implemented more and more. Kelsey came up and said something, it was a little interesting, which was, let's not shift the work left, but let's actually allow the platform to handle this for you. And I think that's one of the things that Harness does really well, is we allow you to put those in the platform. How do you guys see that, putting those security checks, putting those guardrails, but putting them in as policy into the platform, not necessarily shifting the work to other individuals?
I mean, I know you and I have discussed this at length many times, and I know we share a similar view on shift left, which is shift the information left and not the work. You want to have the right information in front of the right person at the right time. And I do think, platform engineering teams as a whole, which includes DevOps and everything else that goes with it, I think you can kind of roll those policies out. I know certainly we recently purchased STO, and actually it's been kind of an enjoyable thing to be able to say.
Enjoyable.
Yeah, no, seriously, an enjoyable thing to say, okay, so now we can just automatically roll out reusable pipeline steps across all of our repos and just get that done in an automated way. And yes, some of the, we already had some of that scanning in place in some of the places, but now we know we have it everywhere, and we have a consolidated way of viewing it, so that kind of automated rollout. And yes, some of the developers are going to be surprised when it says, hey, I'm not letting you merge your PR because you're introducing a new security vulnerability, right? And so we do have to take them on that journey still a little bit, because some of them already did that, and some of them kind of went, yeah, well, I could see the info, but I don't care, right? So, and then you have the policies about, well, you can't deploy, I'm not even going to publish that artifact, so we have to make sure we're doing that. But it's kind of been really nice to be able to say, oh, we've rolled this out and it's now for all the products. It's not one at a time and slow. I mean, it is a little bit because we were doing it. We do want to tell the teams when we're turning it on. We didn't just want to overnight, but we could have done it overnight on all of them. So, and that's very exciting for us, because I feel like that's how we should be able to do it. But it is a collaboration, but it's nice to be able to have the whole stack.
Yeah, I think most of us are in agreement that shifting left is not just shifting here, shovel the work over and say, have fun, figure this out, get back to me when you're done, right? I think that, different teams, that's your responsibility to figure out what is the right things and right policies to set, so that it's all abstracted away from the engineering team, so they can focus on what makes them good engineers, right? Like delivering features in a secure, consistent manner. And if we don't enable that, like we're doing a disservice to them, because then they're worried about like, oh, do I have all the latest packages that aren't going to get yelled at by my security team? Oh, I got to go fix these. I got to fix it. It's like, no. Let's help them. Let's actually tell them how to fix it, or let's fix it for them, right? Like auto remediation on a lot of those things needs to happen. And for us, I know we're early in that journey of really getting those policies in place, but like that's where we're going, right? Like that's our North Star. And I know that if we can shoot for that, we're going to hit it, partly because of the tooling that we have with Harness and some of the just mentality that we have.
Yeah, we're definitely shifting left wherever we can, but to help them. So like with our Harness pipelines, we spoke with the dev teams what's some of their pain and toil from the SDLC process. Change management and compliance is part of that. We definitely work a lot of that into our pipelines so it's automated and they don't think about it. But what I really wanted to focus on in shifting left, aside from a tools perspective, is actually ownership. The developers, a lot of the times, ship the code, go to prod, and then here you go, ops, it's all you guys. I'm trying to shift the ownership left, so they don't do that. They're actually being more conscientious about the quality of their work. All the way to the left, as far left as I can take them before it starts coming right.
I think when we look at how we're doing this, there's different approaches. We can do it in different ways. But when it gets to engineering excellence, it's actually hard to define when you're there. Like, when have I reached engineering excellence? We've had 3 or 4 different people talk about what engineering excellence is. But how do you define, and maybe Bob, I'll even start with you, how do you define engineering excellence?
I will never reach the pinnacle of engineering excellence. I can be honest there. We're not perfect. We're always evolving. There's always new technology coming out. Your 4 new modules that just got released today. I messaged my principal engineers and my leads and managers. That strategy we had earlier this year and that we talked about last month for our quarter planning, check it out the window. We're going to need to revisit it. So there is always a strive to head towards that pinnacle, but that road will never end. It's always going to be continually evolving.
Yeah. I liked what Jyoti said this morning when defined it was it doing ordinary things in extraordinary ways or something like that. I think for me, that's exactly it, right? It's doing the ordinary daily activities of software delivery in just extraordinary ways. It's the how you get there, not just that you get there, right? Because like I said, we see all these people getting there and doing these, delivering these amazing things, but we have no idea how they're getting there. Some of them might be getting there in a very, maybe sometimes uncompliant way, right? Like you don't know until you can measure it. And so I think that's where I'm looking at being able to measure how and why we're getting to that excellent place.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, I kind of like Bob feel like it's I am continually striving to get better. Yeah. And we want all the teams to get better, but it is a constant journey.
I mean, you got to try to push them to the bar every possible second you can, because what I also worry about is that if we define the engineering excellence as X,
right,
and we're heading towards the X, and once we hit the X, they lose interest, right? At that point, then I worry about my people.
No, we have to make it.
We definitely don't want bored engineers.
Right, no.
I like to,
idle hands, right? No, I think a lot of people actually, when you talk about, and again, this is qualitative or quantitative, I've heard people define it as being able to deploy to production anytime. And I think that's an interesting concept, right? But how are we deploying? How secure are we deploying? How resilient are we deploying? How many times are we going to roll back? I think there's more to it than just the art of deploying all the time, because I can tell you I can deploy all the time, but that doesn't mean it's going to go well.
Yeah.
Right? I guess any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think this is exactly kind of what I was alluding to, right? Is a lot of that, like, yeah, the how you got there is important, is just as important as the fact that you got there. So your example of deploying to production, well, how did you deploy to production? Did you just start throwing stuff into production, or did you follow the processes that are in place? So,
Yeah.
Well, on my end, they have to follow the process. No way they'll get into production. But it's more so how we can strive to get to the point where we can deploy to production during peak usage with no interruption to customers' experience during the time frame. I think when we get to that point, I can comfortably tell engineering teams, you've reached a specific level of excellence that you've never been able to achieve before. Now, what do you do next? How do you improve upon that, right? But
that's good.
I definitely do. Right now, our deployments are definitely scheduled off peak hours, but I want to get to the point where we're comfortable with our infrastructure, with our quality of code, to where we can deploy out into production and not have an additional millisecond to any API call at that point.
It's awesome.
A lofty goal, too.
Yes.
It is.
It is, but it isn't just deploying often,
Yeah.
because you can deploy often, and that doesn't mean you're deploying well.
Yes.
Right? It is about making sure that you're deploying back quality every single time. I would rather it take somebody a week between deployments if I know that they're following all the right steps and actually what they're delivering is quality. And I'm looping right back to what I was saying at the start, because then the customer's not finding any bugs and the customer's happy. When the customer's happy, the product team's happy, and Advanced's bank balance is also happy, right? Because happy customers tend to spend more money. So it all ties together, but it is. You need to, we want to do things faster, and deploying more often is definitely good, but doing it the right way is also really key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Last question for the group, and maybe this will take us a while, maybe it won't. When is a good time to get started with engineering excellence?
I mean, yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's, why not, right? Like, why not do it now? Who cares where you're at? You got to evaluate, and I think that's one thing that has been missing for us is how do we evaluate? I think this is a great start with the engineering X stuff, with the actual analysis that you can take. I think there's no reason to wait at all.
No.
For me, I think we're always, as part of our daily job, we're always doing engineering excellence. It's just more so, how do we define the engineering excellence? How do we measure the engineering excellence? I think with the assessment now, with the data, we can start trying to identify with data and metrics how what we're doing. But otherwise, engineering excellence is always, it's in engineering, it's in our heart, right? We always strive to improve, unless you just don't care, but.
I think by nature we have to care. That's why we're working here at these companies. So genuinely, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for coming up and sharing your experiences with this group. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.